Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter has spurred a rigorous debate over free speech, with Musk even weighing in himself.
Musk has accused Twitter of censorship in the past and suggested that those who are unhappy with this takeover of the company must fear free speech.
This morning, we have a live interview with John Baker, an assistant professor of journalism at Ole Miss, who has researched First Amendment issues.
Mr. Baker, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, some business and political leaders have called Elon Musk's purchase of the social media giant Twitter a victory for free speech. Do you think that there will be changes in the types of ideas that are shared online and in society as a whole as a result of this new ownership?
Well, with regards to Musk's acquisition of Twitter, I think this really goes one of two ways. He's either going to find that he faces the same, and he is going to face the same issues and decisions that the company faces now. And at this point, I'm not sure he understands what he's getting himself into when it comes to a speech platform. But he's going to find that those issues and decisions aren't going to change. And one of two things is going to happen. Either Twitter's going to stay pretty much the way it is now, or if he takes it private, it'll evolve to reflect his sensibilities, and in that case will become a much narrower platform for what he calls free speech.
Mm-hmm. And since he has bought Twitter, he sent out a tweet, several tweets actually, and one in particular suggesting that some people who are unhappy with his takeover fear free speech. Do you think there are aspects of free speech that people do fear?
Well, sometimes I don't think fear is quite the right word, but throughout history, the powerful have, in a sense, feared free speech. That's why dictators, one of the first things they do is either take over or shut down the press, because one of the purposes of free speech is to hold those in power accountable for the way they use that power. And that tends to make those in power a bit uneasy because they're subject to a lot more scrutiny than they would otherwise be. In other senses, I'm not sure fear is the right word, but I do think it makes us uneasy in some senses because we don't like to be criticized. We really don't want to hear things that offend our sensibilities. And it takes a bit of sophistication and maturity to be able to understand that those are all part of what we call this marketplace of ideas, and that protecting other speech rights, the rights of other people, is part of protecting my own.
All right.
But I do think the topic makes us a lot of times a bit uneasy. We have an ill-formed idea of what we mean when we say free speech.
Yeah, so keyword uneasy instead of fear.
I think that's often a better way to put it.
Well, I think you touched on this a little bit, but since he's acquired Twitter, Musk has made a number of broader statements, such as free speech being the bedrock of democracy. So now, would you say there are some intricacies or anything on the complex topic of free speech that are important to consider?
How much time do we have? One of the assumptions that's embedded in that statement, bedrock of democracy, is that we're actually going to participate in democracy, a form of governing ourselves, and that we will use speech for that purpose. But that's going to require us to be informed enough and conscientious enough and disciplined enough to do that. And that can be harder to do. That also means that we have to be able to hear information that we need to make decisions, to make judgments about the people who hold office or the policies that they propose. And that's not also, particularly in an environment in which we're filled with all kinds of messages every day, that's not always easy to do either. And it's often easier to sort of shy away from some of that information, either because there's just too much to sift through, or because some of it we don't understand, or because some of it we don't like. And that itself opens up a whole nother area of what the limits are. Part of the assumption, too, that some theorists have put forward is that the whole purpose of free speech is self-government. But that, again, that's a really, really broad subject. A lot of things that might not on the surface appear to be directly related to policy, for example, could bear on the way that we govern ourselves and order our society. And we've wrestled over this for literally centuries.
Well, Professor Baker, thank you so much for joining us. You've given me the chance to not be outnumbered by Mississippi State fans. And, you know, hearing you talk about free speech, it is such a topic that we could spend hours on. I mean, like you said, we've spent centuries on it. And, you know, hearing you talk about it reminds me of my time at Ole Miss and how great the journalism program is there. So thank you again for joining us this morning.
You bet. Thanks for having me.